Everyone on Flight 502 thought she was just another passenger. Jeans, a white shirt, a worn paperback in her hand. No one noticed the quiet confidence in her eyes. But when the chief flight attendant humiliated her in front of the cabin, no one expected her to simply smile and walk off the plane. What no one knew was that Elizabeth Morgan wasn't just any traveler. She was the daughter of SkyWest Atlantic's largest shareholder. And with one phone call, this flight and the airline itself were about to change forever. The terminal at JFK buzzed with the usual noise of late afternoon flights. Rolling suitcases, scattered announcements echoing from overhead speakers, and the quiet hum of passengers scrolling through their phones. Sitting at the far end of Gate 34B, Elizabeth Liz Morgan seemed to vanish into the chaos. Her jeans were worn, her white shirt simple and neatly pressed, her hair tied back in a no-nonsense ponytail. A weathered paperback rested in her hands, the yellowed pages catching the light each time she turned one. To anyone glancing her way, she looked like a regular passenger. There was nothing in her outfit or demeanor that hinted at the influence she wielded. She kept her posture relaxed, her attention locked on the novel, oblivious, or at least appearing oblivious, to the shifting crowd around her. When the boarding call for Flight 502 to San Francisco was announced, she rose from her seat with quiet efficiency. No rush, no visible irritation at the jostling passengers. Her ticket placed her in 3A, a window seat in the forward cabin, technically part of first class. She stepped onto the jet bridge with measured steps, her boarding pass scanned with the same quick beep as everyone else. The flight attendant at the door smiled politely, but barely glanced at her, already focused on greeting the next customer. Inside the cabin, the air was cooler, perfumed faintly with the scent of leather seats and freshly brewed coffee. Liz found her seat easily. 3A was clean, the window offering a view of the bustling ground crew outside. She set her small carry-on into the overhead bin, slid into her seat, and returned to her book as the hum of boarding continued. But peace never lasts long on a plane filled with strangers. A shadow loomed over her. A tall man in a tailored navy suit, his silver cufflinks flashing under the cabin lights, leaned toward her. His voice carried the kind of confidence that came from years of corporate boardrooms. "Excuse me," he said, his tone curt. "I think you're in my seat." Liz looked up, her gray eyes calm but mildly puzzled. She glanced at her boarding pass, then back at him. Before she could speak, the man, Paul Reeves, produced his own ticket with a flourish, holding it close to her face. 3A. "See?" he said, with the faintest hint of irritation, as though the matter were already settled. The aisle grew momentarily congested as other passengers slowed to watch. Some shifted uncomfortably, pretending not to stare. A voice, sharp and efficient, broke through the tension. "Is there a problem here?" Karen Dawson, the chief flight attendant, stepped into view. Her uniform was immaculate, her smile professionally polite but edged with impatience. She quickly scanned the scene. Paul Reeves, a frequent flyer she recognized instantly, and Liz, who in Karen's mind looked distinctly out of place in first class. "What seems to be the issue?" Karen asked, though her eyes were already on Liz. Paul gestured toward Liz with a confident smirk. "She's in my seat, 3A. Karen turned to Liz, her smile thinning. "May I see your boarding pass, ma'am?" Her tone wasn't outright rude, but there was an unmistakable sharpness to it, a subtle drop of respect that Liz noticed but didn't react to. Liz reached calmly into her bag, producing her ticket without a word. Karen took it, scanned the details, and froze for a split second. 3A. Perfectly valid. But instead of apologizing, Karen's expression didn't soften. If anything, she scrutinized Liz more closely now. Her simple shirt, her quiet demeanor, the absence of expensive luggage. Something about it didn't fit with the image Karen expected of a first-class passenger. Paul, meanwhile, hovered impatiently, clearly expecting Karen to fix the situation. Karen handed the ticket back to Liz, her smile fixed but cool. "It appears you're in the right seat," she said, her voice carrying just enough volume for Paul to hear. However, Liz tilted her head slightly, waiting. Karen hesitated just long enough to suggest she was making a judgment call. "Perhaps there's been a mix-up with our seating arrangement. Mr. Reeves is one of our valued customers and, well, sometimes adjustments are made for operational comfort." Liz blinked slowly. She didn't speak. Her silence was unnerving to Karen, who was used to passengers either apologizing or arguing. Paul crossed his arms. "So?" Karen's smile hardened. "Ms. Morgan, would you mind moving to another seat? We can offer you one further back. It will still be very comfortable." The offer was anything but generous. Liz remained still, her book resting closed on her lap. Her lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, but she didn't respond. The silence stretched, the discomfort rippling through the nearby passengers. Karen's composure began to crack. She glanced toward the galley, signaling subtly to another crew member. A quiet exchange followed, too hushed for passengers to hear, but the tension was obvious. Moments later, Karen returned, her tone firmer. "Ma'am, if you'd please come with me, we can resolve this without disruption to the other guests." Liz's gray eyes met Karen's. There was no defiance, no submission, only calm. She nodded once, rose from her seat, and retrieved her bag from the overhead bin. As she stepped into the aisle, she turned briefly toward Paul, offering a small, polite nod. Paul shifted awkwardly, momentarily unsure of himself. As Liz moved toward the front of the plane, a subtle motion went unnoticed by most. Paul Reeves, still standing near 3A, slipped his phone from his jacket pocket. His thumb moved over the screen, the faint reflection of the camera app visible for an instant. Karen escorted Liz toward the exit, her voice carefully measured for anyone listening. "Thank you for your cooperation, Ms. Morgan. We'll find you a suitable arrangement." Liz didn't answer. Passengers watched her pass, some with curiosity, others with avoidance. A few looked away, not wanting to be part of a scene. The quiet hum of the cabin seemed heavier now, as if the air itself held its breath. At the front, the door to the jet bridge remained open. Liz stepped through without a backward glance. Her departure left behind a strange tension, an empty seat in 3A, a faint echo of something unfinished. In row 2, Paul Reeves sat down in 3A, buckled in, and glanced once toward the aisle. His phone rested quietly on the armrest. The screen lit briefly. The video recording icon glowed red. Whatever had just happened wasn't over. The jet bridge was colder than Liz expected, the air conditioning sharp against her skin as she stepped away from the aircraft. The hum of the cabin faded behind her, replaced by the hollow thud of her boots on the industrial carpet. She kept her bag slung casually over one shoulder, her expression unreadable, her pace unhurried. She didn't look back. The gate agent at the entrance, caught off guard by her return, straightened. Ms. Morgan, is everything okay?" Liz offered a polite smile, one of those perfectly neutral gestures that gave nothing away. "Just a small seating issue," she said softly, her tone as calm as if she were discussing the weather. The agent hesitated, uncertain how to respond, but Liz was already moving toward the nearest row of empty seats by the window. She sat down quietly, opened her paperback, and returned to her page as though nothing had happened. Passengers passing through the gate glanced at her, some whispering to one another. A few recognized the scene from the cabin, murmuring about how composed she had been. There had been no raised voice, no defensive outburst, just a quiet surrender. Yet it didn't feel like defeat. Inside the aircraft, however, the incident hadn't ended. In 3A, Paul Reeves leaned back in his seat, his phone angled toward his lap. His fingers moved quickly, typing out a message. Paul Reeves. "She's on 502. Got pulled off the flight. Quiet as always." The message sent with a quiet ping. A moment later, his phone buzzed with a reply. "Unknown contact. Confirmed? Are you sure it's her?" Paul smirked faintly, tapping out his response. Paul Reeves. "Positive. She didn't correct anyone. Same look, same habit, old book in hand, classic Liz. Paul set the phone down briefly, glancing toward the front of the cabin. From his vantage point, he could just see the jet bridge beyond the partially open door. The chief flight attendant, Karen Dawson, was speaking in hushed tones to another crew member, no doubt congratulating herself on resolving the seating dispute. Paul's smirk deepened. Back at the gate, Liz continued to read, turning each page at a slow, steady rhythm. Her breathing was even. A few rows away, a middle-aged couple watched her with a mix of curiosity and unease. They had both seen her on board just minutes earlier, being escorted out. "She didn't even argue," the woman whispered. "Maybe she didn't understand what was happening," the man suggested. The woman shook her head. "No, she understood. She just let it happen." There was something about Liz's stillness that unsettled people. It wasn't the stillness of someone resigned to their fate. It was the stillness of someone in complete control of it. The boarding process continued. Passengers filed past the gate agent, offering tickets and ID without giving the removed passenger another thought. But a few did notice. The way Liz didn't make calls, didn't complain, didn't scroll angrily through social media. One young man, seated a few chairs down, recognized her from somewhere he couldn't place. He opened his phone, half searching his memory. There was something familiar about that quiet composure, but he couldn't quite connect the dots. Inside the aircraft, Paul sent another message. "Paul Reeves. This is going to get interesting. She's exactly as they said. Calm, patient, never shows her hand." A reply came almost instantly. "Unknown contact. Keep me posted. This could change everything." Paul pocketed his phone as the door to the jet bridge finally closed. Karen made her way back through the cabin, offering Paul a tight smile. "Thank you for your patience, Mr. Reeves. We appreciate your understanding." Paul returned the smile with corporate politeness. Of course, always a pleasure to fly SkyWest Atlantic. But his thoughts weren't on Karen. They were on the quiet woman now sitting just outside the plane, turning the pages of her book with deliberate calm. Back at the gate, an announcement crackled overhead. "Final call for Flight 502 to San Francisco. All passengers should now be on board." Liz closed her book slowly, marking her page with a small leather bookmark. She glanced toward the window, watching as the aircraft pushed back from the gate. Her face remained neutral, but there was the faintest glint in her eyes, something that hinted at patience, calculation, and perhaps inevitability. The young man seated nearby continued to glance her way, still trying to place her. His phone buzzed with a notification. A friend had shared a finance article. He opened it absently and froze. The headline read, "Morgan Holdings increases stake in SkyWest Atlantic." The photo accompanying the article was of a distinguished older man, William Morgan, but next to him, half cropped in the background, was Liz. The young man's eyes widened as recognition hit him. He didn't say a word. Inside the plane, Paul checked his phone one last time before switching it to airplane mode. The reply from his unknown contact had come in just before takeoff. Unknown contact. If she's there, then something's already in motion. Paul leaned back, fastening his seatbelt. Outside, the aircraft began its slow taxi toward the runway. He allowed himself a final glance at the terminal window. Though he couldn't see her from here, he had no doubt Liz Morgan was still there, quietly reading, quietly waiting. And that, he knew, was the most dangerous kind of waiting there was. The view from Richard Howard's corner office stretched across Manhattan, glittering in the late afternoon sun. The glass walls reflected the city's energy, streams of traffic, shifting light, the faint hum of the skyline that had become white noise to him over years of running one of the country's largest airlines. On his desk, a neat arrangement of reports and strategy memos sat untouched. Richard had been deep in quarterly numbers when the phone on his desk rang. Not his usual line, but the slim, polished black handset reserved for calls of unusual importance. He frowned, leaning back in his chair. Few people had the number. Fewer still actually used it. "Howard," he answered, his voice clipped, professional. "Mr. Howard." The voice on the other end was calm, deliberate. "This is James from Morgan Holdings." Richard straightened instinctively. He knew the name, though his mind immediately began racing. Morgan Holdings had a substantial stake in SkyWest Atlantic, and when they called, it wasn't for casual conversation. "How can I help you, James?" he asked carefully. There was a brief pause, the kind that made Richard's instincts sharpen. "We wanted to check on the status of Flight 502, James said, each word measured. Richard blinked. 502. He turned slightly, reaching for his keyboard and typing in the flight number. The live dashboard appeared on one of his side monitors, showing a clean, uneventful route from JFK to San Francisco. Pushback completed. Taxi underway. "Everything seems to be on schedule. Is there a specific concern?" Another pause. Longer this time. "No specific concern," James replied smoothly. "Just let us know if there are any irregularities." Richard's brow furrowed. The call was strange, not because Morgan Holdings didn't have the right to check on flights, but because they never did so without reason. And the tone, there was something about the tone that set off a quiet alarm in the back of his mind. "Of course," Richard said, keeping his voice neutral. "I'll personally make sure to flag any unusual reports from 502. "Appreciated," James said. "Have a good evening, Mr. Howard." The call ended with a soft click of finality. Richard sat back in his chair, staring at the skyline but seeing nothing. His mind ticked over the details. No mention of a passenger, no mention of a delay, just a vague request to monitor the flight. He didn't like it. He swiveled in his chair, gesturing for his assistant Claire, who was sorting files just outside his office. "Get me ops on 502, he said. Claire nodded, tapping quickly on her tablet. Moments later, the operations line lit up. "Ops here," a voice crackled over the speaker. "This is Howard. Anything unusual on 502? There was a pause as the operator checked the logs. "Negative, all clear. Boarding completed. Aircraft pushed back. Departing on schedule. Passenger manifest is normal." Richard's gaze drifted back to his monitor. "Run me the manifest anyway." A moment later, a secure document landed in his inbox. He opened it, scanning names without expectation, until one caught his eye. Morgan. He sat a little straighter. Elizabeth Morgan, 3A. The name was common enough. It didn't have to mean that Morgan, but the timing of the call from James. Richard's mind began to turn in darker, more careful circles. He tapped his fingers against the desk, leaning back. "Claire," he said, "get me a background note on Elizabeth Morgan, passenger on 502. Claire raised a brow, just slightly, but didn't ask questions. She disappeared back toward her desk. Richard turned toward the window again, but the view now seemed heavier, as if the glass between him and the skyline had thickened. At the same time, down on the operations floor, a mid-level manager leaned toward a colleague. "You hear about the call from the top floor?" "What call?" "Howard just pinged us about 502. Asked for the manifest." The colleague shrugged. "Probably some VIP on board." The manager's voice dropped. "Yeah, but Morgan Holdings called him, and they didn't say who, just status of 502. The colleague frowned. "That's weird." "Weird enough I'm keeping my eye on it." Back in the CEO's office, Claire returned, a slim folder in hand. "Elizabeth Morgan, 27, American citizen. No flagged travel history. No special watch notices. Booked first class, seat 3A. Richard took the file, scanning it. It was clean, too clean. And for someone booked in first class, there was nothing in the file about her frequent flyer status. No corporate link, no loyalty perks. "That's all?" he asked. "That's all in the record," Claire said. Richard nodded slowly, setting the folder down. The paper looked harmless enough, but something in his gut told him it wasn't. He thought again of the phone call. "Let us know if there are any irregularities." His gaze shifted toward the digital board on his wall, where Flight 502 now showed as departed on time. He didn't know what irregularities he was supposed to be watching for, but he knew one thing: the call had not been routine. Across the city, in a quiet private club, Paul Reeves sat at a table near the back, a whiskey glass untouched in front of him. His phone buzzed softly. A single message appeared from the same unknown contact. Unknown contact. Did the call go through? Paul typed back a single word. Paul Reeves. Yes. Another message appeared seconds later. Unknown contact. Good. Keep your phone close. Paul leaned back, glancing toward the muted television in the corner. The screen showed live financial news. Stock tickers scrolling endlessly. Airline stocks bouncing slightly as they always did in after-hours trade. But Paul's mind wasn't on numbers. It was on the quiet woman left behind at JFK and the ripple she was about to cause. In his office, Richard Howard still stared at the manifest. He picked up the phone, dialing an internal line. Compliance? Flag 502 for direct updates every 30 minutes. Understood, sir. He hung up, his mind running through scenarios. Delays, mechanical issues, disruptive passengers. But something about this didn't feel like a standard operational problem. He didn't yet know about the quiet removal of a passenger before departure. He didn't know about the video recorded in row 3. He didn't know that the Elizabeth Morgan on his manifest was the same Elizabeth Morgan tied by blood to the investors who could change the future of his airline with a single decision. But he would. Soon. And by then, the pressure on Flight 502 wouldn't just be about the schedule. It would be about survival. In the quiet hum of the SkyWest Atlantic headquarters, the Human Resources Department wasn't used to sudden attention from the executive floor. Most of their work involved onboarding, compliance training, and the occasional sensitive personnel matter. But this time, the request came directly from the CEO's assistant. Claire's email was short and formal. Subject: Passenger verification request. Details: please confirm passenger profile for Elizabeth Morgan on Flight 502. Treat as priority. Linda from HR raised her eyebrows at the screen. Passenger profile? She murmured aloud. It wasn't unusual for executives to request background on VIPs, but there was something about the careful phrasing that made her pause. She typed the name into the internal passenger database. The profile loaded in seconds. Elizabeth Morgan, age 27, seat 3A. First-class ticket purchased direct, paid in full. No loyalty program status, no corporate account tag. It was strange. Most first-class travelers on SkyWest were executives, long-time frequent flyers, or celebrities. This was just a clean booking. Linda stared at the screen for a moment. It wasn't suspicious enough to raise alarms, but she had worked here long enough to know when something felt off. She took a screenshot for the CEO's office, attached it to her reply, and hit send. At the same time, a young HR assistant named Derek had been hovering at the next desk. He'd overheard just enough of Linda's muttering to be curious. Derek was part of the new generation at the airline. Hyper-connected, always scrolling, always looking for the next piece of gossip that might give him a story to share in his online circles. When Linda stepped away for a call, Derek's eyes drifted toward her screen, still open to Elizabeth Morgan's profile. He frowned slightly. The name felt familiar, though he couldn't place it. His mind shuffled through headlines, business articles, and social media snippets. Morgan. And then it clicked. Weeks ago, financial news outlets had reported a strategic increase in SkyWest Atlantic shares by Morgan Holdings. The photos in the articles had all shown William Morgan, but in one or two, there had been another figure, slightly out of focus, in the background. A younger woman. Derek's curiosity sharpened into a grin. He pulled out his phone, snapping a quick picture of the screen. Not the whole profile, just enough to show Elizabeth Morgan, seat 3A, flight 502. He hesitated for a moment, then sent it to a private group chat. Derek, guess who's on 502 today? Friend 1. No way that's her. Friend 2. Pics or it didn't happen. Derek. Attached screenshot. The responses came fast. Friend 1. You're kidding. The daughter? Friend 2. That explains everything. Dude, this is gonna blow up. Back in the CEO's office, Richard Howard read the official HR note with a neutral expression. The profile itself said nothing unusual. But in the silence of the room, the weight of the surname settled heavier in his thoughts. Elizabeth Morgan. He had no proof yet, but experience told him there were no coincidences in calls from Morgan Holdings. He turned to Claire. Double-check booking history for 3A, and quietly, don't ping revenue or customer relations. Claire nodded, already typing. Meanwhile, Derek's screenshot had already slipped far beyond the boundaries of his private group chat. One of his friends, a self-styled aviation insider on social media, couldn't resist posting it. The caption was casual, almost teasing. Hearing rumors that a certain very important Morgan was on SkyWest 502 today. The post didn't name names. It didn't have to. In the right corners of social media, Morgan plus SkyWest was enough to ignite speculation. Comments poured in. The Elizabeth Morgan? Why would she be on 502? Wait, wasn't there some drama at JFK earlier today? Hashtags began to sprout. 502 has had Morgan flight, #SkyWest watch. At JFK, Liz still sat in the quiet corner of the gate area, her book open, her demeanor unchanged. But the energy in the terminal had shifted slightly. 2 airline employees near the gate counter whispered over a shared phone screen. A young man scrolling through his feed glanced her way with widened eyes. Liz didn't look up. Her phone, tucked neatly in her bag, buzzed once. A short notification from an encrypted app. Contact. Movement has started. She didn't reply. At SkyWest HQ, Claire returned to Richard's office. Booking for 3A was made personally. No assistant, no corporate trail, no media booking. If this is who we think it is, she didn't want to be noticed. Richard's frown deepened. And yet, HR sent her name through standard channels. Claire hesitated. Sir, there's chatter online. Someone leaked a screenshot of the manifest. Richard's head snapped up. From where? Unclear, but it's already being picked apart in investor circles. Richard leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. The quiet, contained matter was already bleeding into the open. And, in his experience, once speculation started, it was almost impossible to put it back in the box. At the other end of the city, Paul Reeves sipped his whiskey in the private club, scrolling through the same investor chatter. A faint smile touched his lips. He sent a brief message to his unknown contact. Paul. The name's out. They'll connect the dots in hours. Contact. Perfect. Don't engage. Just let it spread. Paul pocketed his phone, leaning back in his chair, as if the rest of the evening's drama was inevitable. Back at JFK, the buzz in the terminal grew just enough for Liz to notice. She closed her book quietly, looking up for the first time in nearly an hour. Her eyes swept the gate area with the same calm detachment as before. Her gaze lingered briefly on a group of passengers scrolling rapidly on their phones, their eyes darting toward her. Liz's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something, just enough to suggest that she knew the tide had shifted, and she wasn't surprised at all. The first hint of power wasn't in any public statement. It wasn't in a display of authority. It was in the silence, and the way the world was beginning to react to her presence without her lifting a single finger. In the quiet corner of JFK's Gate 34B, Elizabeth Liz Morgan remained the picture of composure. The hum of conversations around her shifted. More glances, more subtle movements of passengers checking their phones. But she didn't acknowledge any of it. Her book remained open in her lap, her fingertips gently turning pages. If she noticed the growing murmur in the air, she gave no sign. Liz had learned long ago that silence could be louder than any statement. Across town, at the private club where business deals whispered through leather chairs and low lighting, Paul Reeves sat comfortably at a dark oak table. His phone lay face up, the screen glowing faintly. The video he had taken aboard Flight 502 was already uploaded, anonymously. There was no caption, no name attached, just 32 seconds of footage. A young woman, calm and silent, being approached by a chief flight attendant. A brief exchange, too quiet to hear over the cabin hum. The woman rising, retrieving her bag, and leaving without protest. The visual contrast was striking. In a world addicted to confrontation, the stillness was more shocking than an argument would have been. Paul leaned back as the first notifications rolled in. On social media, the video began quietly, like a spark in dry grass. An aviation forum picked it up first, speculating about strange removals from first class. Then a travel blogger reposted it. No explanation, no disturbance, just this. Hamburger 502. Comments multiplied. Some were curious, others skeptical. Why was she removed if she didn't cause trouble? Looks like discrimination. She didn't even argue. That's weird. Within an hour, someone noticed the screenshot of the passenger manifest that had leaked earlier. The name Elizabeth Morgan appeared in the comments, followed by a wave of speculation. Paul's phone buzzed with a message from an old friend, Alex Bennett, an investigative journalist with a large following and a reputation for sinking his teeth into corporate scandals. Alex, that video you posted, it's you, isn't it? Paul smirked faintly, replying, Paul, anonymous sources are anonymous for a reason. Alex, sure, but if that's who I think it is, this is going to blow wide open. Paul, you didn't hear it from me. Minutes later, Alex's social media account, followed by hundreds of thousands, posted the same video, this time with a sharp caption, Passenger removed from SkyWest Flight 502 before departure. Witnesses report no disturbance. #Justice for Liz. The hashtag moved fast, faster than even Paul expected. By the time Flight 502 crossed into mid-air, tweets and posts numbered in the thousands. Passengers on other flights began checking the tag mid-journey, some sharing their own, less dramatic but equally unpleasant stories of discrimination and mishandled service. Justice for Liz became a rallying point, not just about one passenger, but about the broader way airlines treated those they underestimated. Back at JFK, Liz's phone buzzed softly in her bag. She didn't reach for it. The noise around her was growing. Two teenagers whispering, a gate agent casting her a nervous glance, a businessman pretending not to glance at her between emails. She closed her book slowly, slipping the leather bookmark into place. Her eyes lifted just enough to take in the terminal. Nothing in her demeanor changed, but inside, she could feel the shift. At SkyWest headquarters, Richard Howard's assistant Claire entered his office. "Sir, you need to see this," she said, placing a tablet in front of him. The tablet screen showed the trending hashtag, the video from the cabin playing silently. Richard's expression tightened as he watched. Where did this come from? It's circulating from multiple accounts. Origin unknown, but there's speculation about the passenger's name. Richard set the tablet down, exhaling through his nose. The call from Morgan Holding, the manifest, and now a viral video. Each piece fell into place with a quiet, building pressure. In the newsroom downtown, Alex Bennett refreshed his notifications. The video had been shared over 10,000 times in just 2 hours. Comments flooded in. This is outrageous. We need answers. Who is Liz Morgan? Alex smiled slightly. He knew exactly who Liz Morgan was, or at least who her father was, but he wasn't going to say it yet. Timing was everything. Paul Reeves, meanwhile, left the club and stepped into the cool evening air. He checked his phone one last time before sliding it into his pocket. Paul to Alex. You know what to do, but keep it clean. Alex. Always do. Paul hailed a cab, the faint hum of notifications still buzzing like a quiet metronome in his mind. At JFK, Liz remained in her seat, the quiet epicenter of a storm building thousands of feet above her on Flight 502 and across countless screens worldwide. Her silence wasn't just composure now. It was strategy, Every moment she didn't speak, speculation grew. Every minute without a statement allowed others to shape the narrative, and every version of that narrative painted SkyWest Atlantic in a worse light. She didn't need to defend herself. She didn't need to post. The court of public opinion had already taken her side. The video from Flight 502 had been online for less than 12 hours when the first financial tremors began to ripple through SkyWest Atlantic. Morning news anchors spoke over looping footage of a quiet young woman rising from her first-class seat, escorted by the chief flight attendant toward the jet bridge. On the ticker below, at Justice. For Liz trends overnight. Questions for SkyWest Atlantic. The video had no audio, but it didn't need any. Silence told its own story, and the internet had already decided what that story was. In boardrooms and trading floors across New York, SkyWest stock opened 4% lower than the previous day. It was a small dip, but in an industry that measured confidence in fractions of a point, it was enough to make phones ring. At SkyWest headquarters, CEO Richard Howard stood at the window of his office, staring at the scrolling headlines on the financial network playing in the background. "Justice for Liz," he repeated under his breath. "They've turned it into a slogan." Claire stepped in, tablet in hand. "Sir, social engagement is climbing. Over 250,000 posts in the last 24 hours. We've had 3 separate investor relations inquiries this morning alone." Richard turned toward her, his jaw tight. "Any official statements yet?" "Not from us," Claire said. "But," she hesitated, then handed him the tablet. On the screen was a post from another major airline, Skywings International. The message looked innocuous at first glance. A polished photo of their first-class cabin, accompanied by a caption about their commitment to every passenger's dignity and comfort. Richard's eyes narrowed. They didn't tag us. They didn't have to. Skywings International had long been SkyWest's primary competitor. Behind closed doors, rival executives had been quick to exploit any sign of weakness. The social media team at Skywings didn't post the hashtag outright, but they understood the digital game. Retweet carefully chosen posts, highlight customer care stories that contrasted quietly with SkyWest's unfolding PR disaster. And the internet noticed. Users began tagging both airlines side by side. "See, this is how you treat people. Hashtag Justice for Liz. Switching my next flight to Skywings. At least they respect their passengers." Skywings never responded directly, but their engagement numbers soared. In an operations meeting at SkyWest, the communications director's voice was tense. "We're being undercut on every platform. Competitors are amplifying the narrative without saying our name. It's smart, and it's killing us." Richard leaned forward at the head of the table. "What's our counter?" The director hesitated. "We don't have one. Not yet. If we speak now, without the full story, we'll feed the fire. If we wait, we look silent and guilty." Around the table, department heads avoided his gaze. At JFK, Liz still hadn't spoken to the press. She hadn't posted a word. Her silence had only sharpened the world's focus. In the quiet space of the terminal, a businessman sitting 2 seats away from her refreshed his phone. Stock alerts popped up. SkyWest Atlantic, 6.3% intraday. He glanced at Liz. She didn't look at him, but her calm presence felt heavier now, as if she were the center of gravity for everything spinning out of control beyond these walls. In a sleek glass office at Skywings International, the head of digital strategy smiled faintly at the trending chart. "The hashtag's doubled in reach since we started engagement," she said. The CEO of Skywings folded his hands. "And no direct mention of SkyWest?" "None," the strategist replied. "We're just showing the world how well we treat our passengers." The CEO leaned back. "Good. Let them connect the dots themselves." Back at SkyWest, Richard received another call, this time from a large institutional investor. "We're getting pressure from clients," the voice on the other end said. "This video, this hashtag, it's becoming more than a PR issue. If you can't contain it, you're going to see more than a stock drop." Richard's knuckles whitened around the phone. "We're handling it." But even he knew that handling it was no longer enough. On social media, Skywings continued their subtle campaign. They reposted another customer story, this one from a high-profile travel influencer, about how they'd gone above and beyond to accommodate a seating request. The influencer added their own line at the end. Never had to worry about being removed for no reason. Had a customer first, had justice for Liz. Within an hour, the post had been liked over 50,000 times. In the finance world, the ripple turned into a wave. Analysts began appearing on business news panels, some openly questioning SkyWest's corporate culture. "This isn't just about one passenger," one analyst said. "It's about perception. And right now, perception is that SkyWest is the airline that humiliates passengers, quietly but publicly enough for everyone to see." At JFK, Liz quietly set her book aside. She reached into her bag, removing her phone for the first time all day. She didn't open social media. She didn't make a call. She simply checked the time, her expression unreadable. A new notification appeared on her lock screen from the same encrypted contact. "Contact. They've taken the bait. Skywings is amplifying." Liz locked the phone and placed it back in her bag without reaction. Her silence wasn't just composure now. It was a strategy tightening like a net around the airline that thought removing her from a seat was the end of the story. It was only the beginning. Richard Howard stood at the podium in the SkyWest Atlantic press room. The bright glare of cameras trained on him. The room was filled to capacity. Journalists shoulder to shoulder, television crews jockeying for the best shot. The backdrop behind him bore the SkyWest logo, crisp and unyielding. It had been 4 days since the incident on Flight 502. 4 days of silence from the airline as #Justice for Liz surged across every social platform. Stock value had slipped by nearly 12%. Competitors were capitalizing, investors were restless, and now there was no more room for evasion. Richard straightened his tie, cleared his throat, and leaned toward the microphone. "Good morning. I want to address recent events concerning one of our passengers, Ms. Elizabeth Morgan." The room buzzed instantly at the sound of her name. Richard continued, voice even but tight. "Ms. Morgan is, as has been widely speculated, the daughter of William Morgan, the largest private shareholder in SkyWest Atlantic. While her identity was not known to the crew at the time, the situation on Flight 502 is one we take very seriously." A ripple of voices swept through the room. At the back of the press conference, Alex Bennett, the investigative journalist, scribbled notes. He'd known this was coming, but hearing it confirmed was another thing entirely. Around him, cameras clicked faster. Richard pressed on, the carefully prepared statement in front of him. "SkyWest Atlantic is committed to conducting a full review of our policies, our crew training, and our procedures for passenger relations. We have apologized to Ms. Morgan directly, and we will continue to engage with her representatives to ensure this matter is resolved appropriately." A hand shot up from the press pool. "Mr. Howard, was Ms. Morgan removed due to her appearance? And does her treatment reflect systemic bias in SkyWest's first-class service?" Richard's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "The internal review is ongoing. What I can say is that this is not representative of our standards." But the real story was unfolding outside that room. Across town, in a glittering hotel ballroom, a charity gala was underway. An event Liz had been scheduled to attend long before the incident on Flight 502. The press had not been told she would appear, but rumors had circulated all morning. As the cameras in the press conference room turned back to Richard, cameras at the gala flashed in a very different rhythm. Liz Morgan entered the ballroom not in jeans and a white shirt, but in a deep navy gown that caught the light like still water. Her hair was swept back elegantly, understated jewelry at her neck. She moved with the same calm composure she'd had at JFK, but the context was transformed. Where she had been the quiet passenger in the corner of a gate, she was now the poised figure at the center of a room full of CEOs, politicians, and investors. The contrast was electric. Photographers captured her arrival, the clicks of their shutters almost constant. A few called her name, but Liz offered only polite nods, moving through the crowd without breaking stride. Her presence here was the unspoken answer to every question raised in the press conference. This was who she was. This was what Sky West had risked alienating. Paul Reeves, leaning casually near the edge of the ballroom, watched her entrance with the faintest smile. His phone buzzed. A message from Alex Bennett. "Alex, she's stealing the news cycle, Paul." Exactly as planned. News outlets scrambled. Live feeds from the press conference cut in with shots from the gala. Split-screen coverage flashing. Sky West CEO confirms passenger was Elizabeth Morgan alongside Elizabeth Morgan appears at charity event. Commentators didn't waste time drawing contrasts. Here she is, days after being removed from a plane, showing composure and elegance. Sky West is on the back foot. The image of Liz at the gala became the defining visual of the story. The young woman in jeans, quietly stepping off a flight, had transformed into the heir of Morgan Holdings, moving effortlessly among the elite. At SkyWest HQ, Richard Howard saw the broadcast on the monitor in his office the moment he stepped off the podium. He froze. Liz's appearance hadn't been announced. No statement from her, no media interview, just her presence, radiant, silent, controlled. And yet, it undercut every narrative Sky West had tried to steer. Claire stepped into his office, voice low. She just shifted the entire story in her favor without saying a word. Richard didn't respond. He didn't need to. He knew exactly what had just happened. The public reveal wasn't his press conference. It was hers. At the gala, Liz spoke briefly with a few key figures, smiling politely, listening more than she spoke. Cameras caught everything, but she gave no statement about Sky West. She didn't address Flight 502. And in that silence, the media filled the gaps themselves. She's choosing dignity over confrontation. Her restraint only makes the airline look worse. Outside, reporters crowded the hotel entrance, shouting questions as Liz exited later that evening. She paused briefly at the top of the steps, meeting the flashing lights with a steady gaze. "Ms. Morgan, do you plan to take legal action against Sky West?" Someone called out. Liz's lips curved into the faintest smile. "I plan to keep flying," she said simply. And with that, she stepped into the waiting car, leaving the cameras to catch the door closing in silence. On social media, the clip exploded within minutes. Justice for Liz surged again, now paired with images of her in the gown, the perfect foil to the quiet passenger in jeans. For Sky West, the damage was no longer just about a single incident. It had become a symbol, one that was now embodied in the most public, undeniable way. And for Liz, the public reveal was complete. The press conference room at Sky West Atlantic headquarters looked different today. Gone was the confident corporate branding backdrop. In its place was a more subdued setting, minimal graphics, muted colors, and a tone that hinted at damage control. CEO Richard Howard stepped up to the podium again, this time without the faint threat of authority he'd carried the previous week. His voice was steady, but there was no mistaking the wear in his tone. "After careful internal review of the incident on Flight 502, he began, "we have determined that certain actions taken by members of the cabin crew and airport security did not meet Sky West Atlantic service standards. Effective immediately, Chief Flight Attendant Karen Dawson and Security Officer Mike Harris are no longer employed by Sky West Atlantic." Cameras flashed rapidly. Howard continued, "We thank them for their past service, but it is clear that their judgment in this matter did not align with our values." The statement was clinical, stripped of warmth, designed to close the chapter. But the public sensed more than just professionalism. They sensed sacrifice. Two individuals offered up to contain the fallout. The news hit social media in seconds. On Twitter, the announcement trended under hashtag SkyWest firings. Many applauded the decision, but others weren't satisfied. Firing them doesn't fix systemic bias. What about the culture that allowed this? Two people are scapegoats, the airline gets to move on, not so fast. Howard knew this would happen. Firing Karen and Mike wasn't meant to fix the narrative. It was meant to show movement. But before the media cycle could shift, another bomb dropped. Late that afternoon, an anonymous account posted a short video clip. The footage was grainy, clearly shot on a phone from inside another SkyWest flight months earlier. The camera captured Karen Dawson, her voice audible over the cabin noise. She stood in the aisle, speaking to a passenger. Her tone was sharp, almost condescending. "Sir, if you can't comply with basic seating instructions, perhaps you should consider a different class of service next time." The clip cut to another moment. Karen walking away, shaking her head, muttering something under her breath that could just barely be made out as, "Some people shouldn't fly first." The video ended there, but it was enough. Within hours, the clip was everywhere. News outlets played it side by side with images of Karen from the Flight 5002 incident. Headlines read, "Pattern of behavior. New footage emerges of chief flight attendant fired after Morgan incident." Commentators didn't hold back. "This isn't an isolated mistake. This is a culture problem. Karen's removal isn't just punishment. It's a warning to every crew member still out there." Mike Harris's name trended too, though his role in the video was absent. Leaked internal reports described his involvement. Security officer escorted passenger off aircraft without conducting full secondary verification. People began to dig through his history. Old passenger complaints surfaced, not all substantiated, but enough to paint a picture the public was eager to accept. At SkyWest HQ, Howard stared at the news feeds with his communications director. "Who leaked that video?" he asked sharply. The director shook her head. "Not us. Could be internal, someone in crew networks. Could be external, a competitor looking to make sure this doesn't fade." Howard didn't need her to say the name. Skywings International's PR department had been dancing around this scandal since day one, amplifying hashtags without a single direct reference. And now, a random video dropped at the perfect time? It was too clean to be coincidence. At JFK, Liz scrolled through the headlines for the first time since the incident. Her face remained neutral as she read the news of Karen and Mike's terminations, then the emergence of the second video. Her encrypted messaging app buzzed once. "Contact. Phase 2 complete. The system is turning on itself." She didn't reply. She simply closed the news app and set the phone aside. Public sentiment was at a peak. Comment threads exploded with commentary. Karen got what she deserved. Funny how a second video just happened to pop up now. SkyWest better watch out. They're bleeding trust. The viral nature of the leaked video shifted the conversation. This was no longer just about one passenger's mistreatment. It was about accountability. Paul Reeves, sitting comfortably in his apartment, sipped his drink while scrolling the coverage. Alex Bennett's latest column was open on his tablet. When a company's culture speaks louder than its statements. The piece was scathing. It didn't just blame Karen and Mike. It questioned SkyWest's leadership. Paul set the tablet down, satisfied. This was moving exactly as it needed to. Richard Howard, however, knew the firings wouldn't end this. He stood in his office, looking out over the city. 2 names had been removed from payroll, but the shadow of Flight 502 still stretched across the company. The public punishment was complete, but the fight to save the airline's credibility had only just begun. The morning after Karen and Mike's dismissals, the SkyWest Atlantic executive floor was unnervingly quiet. No one was celebrating a crisis averted. Everyone knew the storm was still moving overhead. Richard Howard sat in his office with a fresh briefing in front of him. It wasn't from his PR department or legal team this time. It was from Investor Relations. The headline made his chest tighten. Morgan Holdings freezes select capital commitments to SkyWest Atlantic pending review. The language was careful, the kind of corporate phrasing designed to avoid panic. But Richard knew exactly what it meant. William Morgan's investment group was pressing pause on several major capital infusions. Claire stepped into his office, tablet in hand. "The media's already picked it up. They're calling it a soft withdrawal. Stock dropped another 2% this morning." Richard set the paper down, rubbing his temples. They're signaling to the market that they've lost confidence, even without selling shares. That's lethal, Claire finished quietly. On financial news networks, the analysts were in full swing. This is significant. Morgan Holdings has been one of SkyWest's most stable backers. The freeze doesn't just hurt liquidity, it damages reputation. Screens across Wall Street showed SkyWest's ticker in red. As if that weren't enough, the next call came not from an investor, but from the FAA. The Federal Aviation Administration's voice on the line was official, controlled. Mr. Howard, we've received multiple formal complaints regarding passenger treatment and crew decision-making procedures. We're opening a review into SkyWest Atlantic's compliance protocols. Richard kept his voice even. We'll cooperate fully. The FAA official's tone did not soften. We recommend your team be prepared for a procedural audit within the next week. When the call ended, Richard stared at his desk. The Karen Dawson incident wasn't going to be contained to one viral moment. It was becoming an institutional review. In the communications department, the crisis team scrambled to prepare internal talking points for employees. We need everyone on the same message, the director said. No speculation, no comments about policy changes until we finalize with legal, and absolutely no discussion of the FAA review. But controlling a narrative in the middle of a storm was like trying to hold water in cupped hands. That afternoon, another blow landed. This one not from regulators or investors, but from the media. An investigative journalist posted what they claimed was a leaked internal document, a SkyWest Atlantic Diversity and Compliance report from 3 years ago. The key excerpt circulated quickly. Recommendation: increase bias and cultural sensitivity training for first-class cabin crews due to repeated passenger complaints regarding inconsistent service delivery based on appearance, attire, and perceived status. It was damning. On social media, the excerpt was reposted thousands of times in hours. So they knew this was a problem years ago. This isn't one bad flight attendant. This is a pattern. The hashtag #HatJustice for Liz merged with a new one, #SkyWestNew. In Richard's office, the legal counsel dropped the printed copy of the leaked report onto his desk. We were supposed to handle this internally, she said tightly. Now it's public, and it's clear we didn't take strong enough action at the time. Richard looked at the report for a long moment. Who leaked it? We don't know. Could be internal. Could be, she hesitated. Skywings, Richard finished flatly. Across the city, in the headquarters of Skywings International, their CEO scrolled through the leaked report on his phone, a small smile playing at the corner of his mouth. Keep engagement high, he told his communications director. No direct mention, just highlight our own compliance record. Let the public do the comparisons. Meanwhile, at Morgan Holdings, William Morgan's senior advisors met in a private conference room. William's instructions are clear, one said. We maintain our shares but freeze all new capital. The message will be unmistakable. Another advisor nodded. It's not just about protecting the investment, it's about forcing systemic change. At JFK, Liz sat in a quiet corner of the terminal lounge. She scrolled through the headlines without expression. The leaked report was everywhere. Her encrypted phone buzzed with a single message. Contact. Phase 3 initiated. Structural pressure applied. She set the phone aside, her calm demeanor unchanged. The fallout rippled far beyond SkyWest. Other airlines began reviewing their own internal training manuals, issuing preemptive press releases about their commitment to equality and passenger dignity. SkyWest, however, was in the spotlight. And now, the story was no longer just about a passenger removed from a plane. It was about a company that had been warned and failed to act. Richard Howard knew what the next step would be: reform. But whether he would be the one leading it was another question entirely. The days following the FAA's announcement and Morgan Holdings' investment freeze were the most turbulent SkyWest Atlantic had experienced in years. At first, it was confined to stock prices and investor calls. But then, as the leaked compliance report spread across mainstream news, the reaction spilled out into the public with a force the airline couldn't contain. Boycotts began quietly. A well-known travel blogger posted, "Until SkyWest addresses systemic issues, I'm booking elsewhere. Had justice for Liz and had it fly fair." Within hours, other influencers, including several with millions of followers, posted similar statements. Soon, the hashtag shifted. Justice for Liz began appearing alongside hashtag boycott SkyWest. At major airports, subtle changes were happening. Gate agents noticed passengers rebooking on competitor airlines. Loyalty program members called in to pause their memberships. Corporate accounts started moving bookings to other carriers. In one internal email, a regional sales manager wrote, "We've lost 2 Fortune 500 accounts in the last 48 hours. Both cited the Morgan situation and public perception." Meanwhile, on social media, the backlash was growing teeth. Former SkyWest passengers began sharing their own experiences. First-class ticket, but treated like I didn't belong. SkyWest loves their VIPs, but if you don't look the part, good luck. The tone of the conversation had shifted. It wasn't just about Liz anymore. It was about a culture the public had decided was elitist and discriminatory. Then came the twist. An anonymous account on an airline employee forum began posting a series of messages. "You think this is just about one flight? We were trained to protect the brand image of first class." That meant making VIP regulars happy and quietly discouraging passengers who didn't fit the look. The posts were signed only as former FA, former flight attendant. Screenshots from these posts leaked to Twitter and Reddit. They described the unwritten rule. Certain frequent flyers were treated with exaggerated courtesy, sometimes even at the expense of other first-class passengers. One post read, "If a VIP wanted a specific seat, we'd move someone else, even if that person had a valid boarding pass. We just made it seem like a technical mix-up." SkyWest's PR department scrambled to respond. "This is categorically false," their statement read. "SkyWest does not condone any form of bias in passenger treatment. Our goal is equal, premium service for all first-class customers." But the denial did nothing to stop the wave. At SkyWest HQ, Richard Howard stared at the trending hashtags. Justice for Liz, #boycott. SkyWest, #VIP treatment, #SkyWest new. Claire entered his office, her expression tight. "We have another problem," she said, sliding a tablet across his desk. On the screen was a viral video from a SkyWest crew member, still employed, speaking anonymously with their face blurred. "I've worked here for 8 years. I've seen it happen dozens of times. Certain passengers got priority service, upgrades, even seats reassigned, just because they were important. And when someone didn't look the part, we were encouraged to manage the situation quietly." The video was picked up by news networks within hours. In one broadcast, the clip played alongside a segment from a travel analyst. The perception now isn't just that SkyWest mishandled one situation. It's that there's a deep, embedded culture problem. This is no longer a PR crisis. It's an existential one. At JFK, Liz watched from a quiet corner of the lounge as the segment aired on a nearby television. She didn't look pleased, or angry, or even surprised. Her phone buzzed with a message from her encrypted contact. "Contact. Phase 4 activated. Internal voices are speaking up." She locked the phone without replying. Back in the SkyWest press office, the communications team worked overtime drafting responses. But the tide was against them. Every statement was picked apart. Every denial countered with new testimony. On employee forums, more former staff came forward, emboldened by the anonymity of the internet. "I've seen a gate agent told to move someone in first class because a VIP wanted a better view. We called it priority reallocation. Everyone knew what it meant." The boycott gained momentum. Rival airlines, smelling opportunity, began running targeted ads. "We treat every passenger like a VIP, no exceptions." Skywings International's latest ad campaign was particularly sharp. A 30-second spot showing diverse passengers in first class, ending with the line, "Comfort, respect, no exceptions." They never mentioned SkyWest. They didn't have to. Richard Howard convened an emergency meeting with the board. "This is getting away from us. one director said bluntly. Morgan Holdings has frozen investments. The FAA is circling. Now we have internal testimonies going public. Richard kept his voice steady. We can contain it, but we need a plan, fast. Another director shook his head. Containment might not be possible. Reform is the only way forward. Outside the boardroom, the public pressure was still building. A group of passengers gathered outside SkyWest's terminal at LAX holding signs. Equal treatment for all. No more VIP rules. News crews filmed the small protest, which quickly spread across social media. In the lounge at JFK, Liz closed her book. For the first time since the incident, she rose and walked toward the boarding gate for another flight. Passengers noticed her but didn't approach. Her silence still spoke louder than any statement could. The public backlash had reached critical mass. The next move, everyone knew, would have to come from SkyWest itself. The boardroom at Morgan Holdings was quiet, the kind of quiet that signaled both decision and inevitability. William Morgan, tall and deliberate in his movements despite his age, stood at the head of the table. His advisors sat in disciplined silence, papers neatly stacked in front of them. The air carried the faint scent of fresh paper and strong coffee. On the wall, a large display screen showed a live feed of SkyWest Atlantic's stock performance, still battered, still unstable. William rested both hands on the table. It's time, he said. No one in the room asked what he meant. They all knew. For days, the public conversation had been dominated by SkyWest's scandal. Now, Morgan Holdings would set the terms of its resolution. William's senior advisor, Martin Graves, opened a folder, revealing a set of documents. At the top, Clear Skies Initiative, Proposal for Operational and Cultural Reform at SkyWest Atlantic. William glanced at it briefly, then looked around the table. This isn't just about repairing the stock. It's about rebuilding trust. The brand can recover, but only if the public believes change is genuine. The plan was bold. Under the Clear Skies Initiative, Morgan Holdings would demand that SkyWest overhaul its service protocols, from first-class operations to basic customer interaction training. New standards would be implemented. Comprehensive bias training for all crew members, transparent seat assignment policies, eliminating informal VIP reallocation, independent oversight committee to monitor passenger treatment complaints, quarterly public reports on service quality and compliance. But the most significant piece was financial. Morgan Holdings would reinstate its frozen capital if SkyWest adopted the initiative in full. At SkyWest headquarters, Richard Howard listened to the proposal over a video call flanked by his top executives. His expression was careful, but he knew they had no real leverage. If we accept, Richard said slowly, this will fundamentally change our operations. Exactly, William replied. That's the point. The announcement was made the following week at a joint press conference in New York. The stage was set with the SkyWest and Morgan Holdings logos side by side. William Morgan stood at the podium, his voice steady, his presence commanding the room without theatrics. In partnership with SkyWest Atlantic, he began, Morgan Holdings is proud to introduce the Clear Skies Initiative, our commitment to ensuring dignity, fairness, and equality for every passenger. He outlined the reforms in detail. Each point met with the clicking of cameras. The press leaned forward, but there was one question everyone was waiting to ask. Mr. Morgan, a reporter said, is this initiative in response to your daughter's experience on Flight 502? William's gaze was unwavering. My daughter's experience highlighted issues that were already present, but this initiative is not about one passenger. It is about every passenger. This is a reform for the system, not an individual. While William spoke, Liz was not on stage. She was seated in the audience, quietly dressed in a simple black suit, her hair pulled back. She hadn't given interviews. She hadn't made statements. And now, as cameras inevitably turned toward her, she maintained the same calm composure she had shown since JFK. When the press conference ended, a few reporters approached her. Ms. Morgan, do you have a comment on the initiative? One asked. Liz paused, her gray eyes steady. This was never about me. I don't want my name on any policy. The only thing I want is for the system to change, for everyone." Her voice was quiet, but the words spread almost instantly. The public reaction was immediate. News outlets praised her restraint, contrasting her measured response with SkyWest's earlier missteps. On social media, hashtags began to shift. Justice. For Liz was joined by #ClearSkies Initiative, with many commentators noting how unusual it was for a scandal to produce a tangible reform plan. At SkyWest HQ, Richard Howard began implementing the first steps of the initiative. The company's training division was overhauled. Internal memos outlined new mandatory programs for all flight crews, with compliance monitored by external auditors. In employee break rooms, the tone was mixed. Some welcomed the change. Others grumbled at the increased scrutiny. A flight attendant in Los Angeles was overheard saying, "About time we stopped playing favorites. Maybe now people will actually trust us again." In the media, the Clear Skies Initiative became a turning point. One news anchor summarized it. "What began as a viral scandal involving one passenger has become a landmark case in corporate reform, and the passenger at the center of it refuses to take credit." At Morgan Holdings, William reviewed the early market response with Martin Graves. SkyWest stock had stabilized slightly, buoyed by investor optimism. "They'll recover," Martin said. William nodded, but his expression remained thoughtful. "Recovery is only worth something if it lasts. Let's see if they can sustain this beyond the headlines." That evening, Liz returned quietly to JFK. She passed through the terminal unnoticed by most, her presence blending with the ebb and flow of travelers. A news crew caught sight of her just as she approached the gate for another SkyWest flight. They called her name, asking if she was confident in the airline's reforms. Liz paused only for a moment. "I'm confident in accountability," she said simply. And with that, she boarded her flight. Her seat this time, first class, was not contested. The crew greeted her politely, without excess ceremony. Passengers glanced at her but didn't intrude. The atmosphere was different, subtly but unmistakably. In the weeks that followed, the Clear Skies Initiative began to take root. SkyWest published its first quarterly compliance update, detailing training completions and service audits. Public perception shifted slowly but steadily, and through it all, Liz kept her distance from the spotlight. When asked again by reporters why she refused public recognition for the initiative, her answer was always the same. Because this was never about one person. If the system works for everyone, that's enough. Her refusal to take credit became its own kind of statement, and perhaps the strongest one of all. The terminal at JFK was calm in the late afternoon light. The storm of cameras, hashtags, and protests had moved on. For most passengers, SkyWest was just an airline again, albeit one with new policies and a reformed public image. In a quiet corner near Gate 21A, Elizabeth "Liz" Morgan sat the way she always had. Jeans, a crisp white shirt, hair pulled back in an understated ponytail. No entourage, no security detail, no special boarding announcements. She read her worn paperback while passengers drifted past without the buzz of recognition that had once followed her every move. When the boarding call for her flight was announced, Liz rose with the others and walked calmly to the gate. The SkyWest gate agent scanning tickets recognized her instantly, but said nothing. There was no exaggerated greeting, no PR-polished words, just a small nod of acknowledgement and the familiar beep of her boarding pass. On board, the cabin crew moved with quiet efficiency. The chief flight attendant, a man in his 40s with a measured professionalism, approached her seat, offering the standard first-class welcome. There was a trace of extra care in his tone, but it wasn't performative. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Morgan," he said simply. Liz returned a polite smile and took her seat. As the aircraft filled, a few passengers in nearby seats recognized her. No one whispered loudly or stared. There was a subtle shift in the atmosphere, more restrained, almost reverent. A businessman in 3C glanced at her over his tablet, then nodded slightly, as though acknowledging something unspoken. A young woman in 2A, clearly a frequent flyer, smiled faintly but kept her distance. The respect was there, but it was quiet. Once the flight was airborne, service began. The crew moved professionally, attentive but not hovering. There was no ceremony, no overcompensation, just the quiet competence that SkyWest had promised in the wake of the Clear Skies initiative. Liz accepted a drink, thanked the attendant, and returned to her book. From an outside perspective, it was an entirely ordinary flight. But for those on board, there was an unspoken awareness that they were witnessing something different, something shaped by the changes she had set in motion without ever demanding credit. Far from the cabin of Flight 214, in SkyWest's executive offices, a different kind of change was underway. Richard Howard sat at the head of the long boardroom table for the last time. His resignation had been finalized that morning. The board had accepted it unanimously. For Richard, it wasn't an admission of defeat. It was the recognition that his position had become untenable. The airline's survival required a fresh face, one not tied to the crisis. His replacement was unexpected. A senior executive who had initially opposed the depth of the Clear Skies initiative, arguing it was too disruptive to existing operations. And yet, over the months that followed, that same executive had come to see the value of the reforms, not because of investor pressure, but because of the clear impact on public trust and operational culture. The irony was not lost on Richard. At the press conference announcing the transition, the new CEO addressed the media with a tone of cautious optimism. SkyWest Atlantic is entering a new chapter, he said. The Clear Skies initiative will continue in full. This is not a temporary program. It is our future standard. Reporters asked about his earlier resistance. The new CEO didn't dodge the question. I questioned the scope, he admitted. I was wrong. The results speak for themselves. Back on Flight 214, Liz was unaware of the details playing out in the boardroom. Or perhaps she was aware and simply chose not to react. At 35,000 feet, she closed her book and gazed out the window. The clouds stretched endlessly beneath the wing, the sunlight glinting off the fuselage. For the first time since Flight 502, she felt the quiet of air travel as it was meant to be, peaceful, uneventful, free of unnecessary tension. As the aircraft descended toward its destination, the chief flight attendant returned to her seat. "Ms. Morgan," he said softly, "on behalf of the crew, thank you for flying with us again." Liz looked up, her expression calm but warm. "Thank you for the flight," she replied. There was no speech, no symbolic handshake, no moment designed for cameras. The respect was silent, but it was there. When the plane touched down, passengers gathered their belongings. Several glanced her way as they passed, offering small nods or polite smiles. No one stopped her. No one asked for a statement. And Liz preferred it that way. She stepped off the plane the same way she had stepped on, quietly, unassumingly, blending back into the flow of travelers. In the weeks that followed, SkyWest continued its reforms under new leadership. Service quality improved. Customer complaints dropped. The Clear Skies initiative became a model for other airlines. Liz stayed out of the spotlight. Her silence, as always, spoke louder than any public statement.